1890. A small town in Normandy, France. A man named Paul Fleury has an idea. He's been running a cotton mill in Gonneville, but cotton is dying, cheaper production in the east. So he opens a new factory, 50 kilometers away. Different fiber, same machines.
He recruited his own workers.
17 of them. People who knew him, people who trusted him. Women, mostly. The French textile workforce was predominantly female. 92,000 women versus 75,000 men in the cotton trade. These 17 knew how to card fibers, how to run the spinning frames. Fleury told them the work was the same, just a different material.
Asbestos.
Over the next 16 years, 16 of those 17 workers were dead.
16 out of 17.
94%. Nobody investigated. Nobody was charged. A factory inspector wouldn't even document the deaths until 1906. Welcome to Arc 4. The warnings ignored. This is episode 15. The body count begins.
Asbestos, a conspiracy 4,500 years in the making, is brought to you by Danziger and Diano, a nationwide mesothelioma law firm with over 30 years of experience and nearly $2 billion recovered for asbestos victims. If you or someone you love has been diagnosed with mesothelioma, they offer free consultations and only get paid if you win. Visit dandell.com, that's DANDELL.com.
Before we go forward, let's look back. We just finished Arc 3, the Industrial Revolution. 5 episodes.
What did we learn?
We learned what the industry counted and what it didn't. Quebec measured asbestos recovery rates to the tenth of a pound, could tell shareholders exactly how much rock produced exactly how much fiber, but couldn't tell a single worker whether the dust was destroying his lungs.
They tracked the product, not the people.
Coal mining had mandatory death reporting from 1850, over 164,000 individual accident records, with names. The fatal accident rate in coal and asbestos was identical, 1.67 deaths per 1,000 workers. Coal got a database, asbestos got a void.
And the people who fell through that void.
Nellie Kershaw started carding asbestos at 12, dead at 33. The company's response: asbestos is not poisonous. Dr. Murray's patient, the only survivor of 10 in his carding room, he told Parliament what happened. And what did Parliament do? Nothing. Nobody checked. Nobody went looking.
Arc 3 was about the absence.
The absence. Who wasn't counted, why they weren't counted, and what that silence bought the industry. Decades of plausible deniability. No records means no pattern. No pattern means no proof.
But some people did count.
Some people counted, and that's where Arc 4 begins, the warnings ignored. Over the next several episodes, we're going to trace what happened when the evidence started piling up. Medical reports, government inquiries, insurance data, case after case after case. And we're going to watch an industry learn how to make sure none of it mattered.
So where does the counting start?
With a woman who'd already seen the worst that industry could do to a human body. Lucy Ann Evelyn Deane, born 1865, Madras, India.
India.
Daughter of the British Raj, her father was Lieutenant Colonel Bonar Millet Deane, an army officer. Her mother was the Honourable Lucy Boscawen, sister of Evelyn Boscawen, 6th Viscount Falmouth. Seats in the House of Lords. This is the edge of the aristocracy.
So how does she end up in factories?
By 1886, both parents are dead. She's 21, an orphan of the upper classes, well-connected enough to open doors, but with no inheritance to live on.
She needed a purpose.
She found one. 1890, she enrolled with the National Health Society, trained as a nursing sister, earned her sanitary inspector's qualification in 1893, and then she met a woman named May Abraham.
And who was May Abraham?
Britain's first female factory inspector, appointed by Home Secretary Herbert Asquith in 1893. When the team expanded from 2 inspectors to 4 the following year, Lucy Deane joined.
4 women inspecting all the factories in Britain.
And here's what nobody expected. Those 4 women received full powers of inspection, enforcement, and prosecution immediately upon appointment. More authority than the 15 male assistant inspectors hired the same year who could only gather information.
The women had more power than the men.
More legal power, less pay, and open hostility from male colleagues who, quote, already doubted their competence and suitability for the role.
Of course they did.
Deane traveled alone, stayed in unpleasant hotels, and within months, she'd personally identified 8 prosecution cases against firms violating the Factory Acts. She stood up in court herself, stated the facts, called witnesses. A woman acting as a prosecutor in an era when women had no place in the legal profession. That's who Lucy Deane was before Asbestos.
What had she seen before the asbestos factories?
The dangerous trades. White lead works, women called bed workers stacking lead cakes with bare hands. Blue lines forming around their gums, the first sign lead was in their bodies. Then headaches, anemia, blindness, a condition called wrist drop, a partial paralysis of the hand.
And match factories.
Bryant and May, 14-hour days, white phosphorus vapors, phossy jaw. The jawbone literally rotting, turning green and black, spreading to the brain. Nearly 1 in 5 workers died of it.
That's the woman who walked into an asbestos factory.
In 1898, and she saw something that the workers themselves couldn't see. She arranged for the medical inspector of factories, a man named Thomas Legg, to examine the dust under a microscope. Legg was the first medical inspector of factories, appointed that same year. And what he saw under the lens confirmed what Deane already suspected.
The fibers.
Mineral, rigid, nothing like cotton or hemp. Quote, where they are allowed to rise and remain suspended in the air in any quantity, the effects have been found to be injurious, as might be expected.
As might have been expected.
Yeah, of course they're dangerous. Look at them. And Deane didn't stop at the microscope. In the same report, she identified something that epidemiologists wouldn't formally name for another 50 years.
What's that?
The healthy survivor fallacy. Quote, there is always a certain proportion of old workers, the survivors of their mates, who are found in every unhealthy industry and appear to thrive on their unhealthy calling.
Survivorship bias in 1898.
Factory owners would point to the old workers who'd survived and say, see, the work is safe, while ignoring all the ones who died. She saw the trick, and she published it. Annual Report of Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Factories, 1899, pages 171 to 172. Submitted to Parliament.
And?
Filed.
Reports filed and forgotten. We keep hearing that phrase. And if you're facing a mesothelioma diagnosis, you deserve someone who won't let your case get filed away. Danziger and Dayano, 30 years fighting for asbestos victims. Dandel.com.
Now, last episode, we told you about 50 deaths at a factory in Normandy. What we didn't tell you is how it started. Those 17 workers Fleury recruited from Gonneville, women who'd been carding cotton, who understood the machines, who were told asbestos was simply a different fiber.
Same machines, different material.
Except cotton dust is soft, organic. It settles. Asbestos fibers are mineral, rigid, glass-like and jagged, to borrow Deane's description. Every rotation of those carding machines shattered the fibers into particles so fine they were invisible.
How fast did it kill them?
16 of those 17 workers were, quote, carried off. The 17th disappears from the historical record. We don't know if she survived or simply wasn't counted. In 1906, a factory inspector named Denis Auribeau finally investigated. He documented 50 total deaths at that factory between 1890 and 1906.
50.
But here's the thing. Auribeau made a critical error. He attributed the deaths to calcium carbonate dust, not asbestos fibers. He saw the bodies, he counted the dead, but he misidentified the killer.
And his report.
Quote, filed by the administration and remained a dead letter.
A dead letter.
That valley didn't die with the report. A British company called Ferodo moved in 1927, built new factories. By the 1950s, 3,000 workers, brake pads, fireproof board. Local people remember snow all year, asbestos dust settling across the valley and surrounding villages.
Snow all year.
They called it La Vallée de la Mort, the Valley of Death. France didn't ban asbestos until 1997, 91 years after Auribeau's report.
91 years. And France wasn't the only country ignoring the evidence.
Not even close. 1902, Adelaide Anderson, Chief Lady Inspector of Factories in Britain, includes asbestos in Thomas Oliver's book, Dangerous Trades, an official list of harmful industrial substances. No regulatory action followed.
2 more warnings, 2 more filings.
1908, Italy. A doctor named Luigi Scarpa examines 30 asbestos workers, 9 men, 21 women. He documents their lung disease, but he blames tuberculosis.
Not asbestos.
The same mistake Auribeau made. They see the disease, they can't name the cause. Or they name the wrong one. And 1914, Germany. A 35-year-old woman worked in an asbestos factory, dead. A physician named Farr publishes the case. He describes a large number of crystals in pulmonary tissue of a peculiar nature. He calls himself, quote, somewhat mystified.
He found asbestos in her lungs and didn't know what it was.
The first published case of fatal asbestosis in a medical journal, 1914. And still, no country regulates, no company acts.
So by 1914, how many countries had evidence?
Britain, France, Italy, Germany. Medical reports in every one. And here's what connects them all. Thomas Legge,
Deane's microscope partner.
the man who examined those fibers in 1898, who saw their shape, who understood what they could do. He served as medical inspector of factories for nearly 30 years, and in 1906, he was sitting on the committee that heard Dr. Murray's testimony about 10 dead workers in a carding room. You remember that testimony from last episode.
Murray told them he was the last survivor of 10. The committee moved on.
And the result? 1907, the Workmen's Compensation Act was updated to cover 6 industrial diseases: poisoning of lead, mercury, arsenic and phosphorus, anthrax and hookworm.
Not asbestos.
Legge was there. He'd seen the fibers. He'd heard the testimony. He had evidence from 1898 and 1906, and asbestos didn't make the list.
And what happened to him?
He went on with his career, knighted in 1925, Sir Thomas Legge. And after he retired, he wrote 2 things that should haunt every regulatory body in the world.
Tell me.
1929, Legge's 4th axiom, quote, all workmen should be told something of the danger of the materials they come into contact with and not be left to find it out for themselves, sometimes at the cost of their lives.
He wrote that?
And 1934, his book Industrial Maladies, quote, looking back in the light of present knowledge, it is impossible not to feel that opportunities for discovery and prevention of asbestos disease were badly missed.
He's talking about himself.
He's talking about himself. 31 years of holding evidence and doing nothing. He wrote the axiom about telling workers the truth, and he was the man who hadn't told them.
So what do we have by 1914? Lucy Deane, 1898, Auribeau, 1906, Murray's testimony, 1906, Adelaide Anderson, 1902, Scarpa in Italy, 1908, Farr in Germany, 1914.
6 warnings, 4 countries, 0 regulations. And here's the part that matters for ARC 4. This wasn't conspiracy yet. Nobody needed to manufacture doubt because nobody was demanding answers. The regulatory system deferred to industry. The medical profession accepted the absence of evidence as evidence of absence. And the survivorship fallacy that Lucy Deane identified in 1898 was doing its work quietly. Managers pointing to the old workers who survived. Nobody mentioning the ones who didn't.
Passive negligence.
Passive negligence. The industry didn't need a conspiracy because the system was already built to protect it. But that changes because by 1918, the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. And that's when the industry shifts from not caring to actively covering up.
That's ARC 4.
That's ARC 4, the warnings ignored. Over the next several episodes, here's what's coming. Episode 16, The Doctors Who Knew. Between 1906 and 1924, doctors across Europe document case after case. The medical literature builds, and every time a physician publishes a finding, the same thing happens. Nothing.
And then?
Episode 17 takes us inside the corporate boardrooms, the moment passive negligence becomes active conspiracy. Suppressed studies, altered reports, the sentence deleted from a medical paper because it mentioned the word fatal. A company president asked if he'd let his workers die to keep using asbestos. His answer, yes, we save a lot of money that way. And by the end of Arc 4, we reach 1930, the Merewether Price Report, the British government study that finally, definitively, undeniably proved what Lucy Deane saw under that microscope 32 years earlier. 66% of long-term workers had asbestosis.
And the industry's response to definitive proof?
Minimum of publicity.
Warnings ignored, bodies counted. And if you're dealing with the consequences of that negligence today, there are people who've spent their careers making sure the counting finally matters. Dave Foster has spent 18 years at Danziger and Deane, helping families trace exposures that nobody tracked. He lost his own father to asbestos lung cancer. He knows what it means when nobody counts the bodies.
Anna Jackson is in charge of patient support. Nearly 15 years, she lost her own husband to cancer. Paul Danziger has spent over 30 years in mesothelioma litigation, making sure families like yours get counted.
Dandell.com. That's DANDELL.com.
Next week, the doctors who knew.
17 women. That's what I keep coming back to.
Cotton workers. They knew the machines. They trusted the man who hired them.
He recruited them personally from his old factory. Come work for me again. Same job, different fiber.
And 5 years later, 16 of them are dead.
You know what gets me? It's the same machines. They would have stood in the same positions, done the same motions. The only thing different was the dust.
Cotton dust settles. Asbestos dust doesn't.
And Deane, she'd already watched women die from white lead, watched women's jaws rot from phosphorus, and then she walks into an asbestos factory and identifies a statistical fallacy 50 years before anyone names it.
While her male colleagues questioned whether women should be inspecting factories at all.
And Deane, he looked through the damn microscope. He saw what those fibers looked like, and then he sat in a committee room 8 years later, listened to testimony about 10 dead workers, and did nothing.
For 31 years.
31 years. And then he writes an axiom about telling workers the truth after a career of not telling them.
Opportunities badly missed.
That's a hell of a way to describe letting people die.
That's one way to put it.
Sorry, but it is. You look through a microscope, you see exactly what those fibers are, and you walk away for 31 years. That's not an opportunity missed, that's a choice.
Yeah.
Anyway, episode 16 is going to be worse, isn't it?
Much worse.
Great.